My girlfriend commented on another guy's post. Missed this so much, loudly crying face, while sitting next to me. I said nothing, just liked her comment and walked out quietly. She didn't notice until she checked her phone. You always make everything feel smaller than it is. She said that to me once, about 8 months into our relationship, during an argument about something I can't even remember now. I do remember how her voice sounded when she said it. Calm, almost bored, like she'd been waiting to use that line for a while. I remember standing there in the kitchen, holding a dish towel, completely frozen. And I remember thinking, maybe she's right. Maybe I make things smaller. Maybe I overthink, overreact, overfeel things that don't deserve that much space inside me. So I got quiet. I folded the dish towel, put it on the counter, and I said, "You're probably right." That became a habit. Not just with her, with myself. I started shrinking things down, compressing feelings until they were small enough to live with. A tight knot somewhere behind my ribs that I could mostly ignore if I stayed busy enough. And for a while, it worked. Until the night I watched her type the words that broke something I didn't even know was still whole. I'm 27. She, Leah, is 25. We'd been together for 14 months when this happened. No dramatic backstory up front. No history of infidelity. No red flags waving in neon. Just two people who moved too fast, assumed too much, and stopped really seeing each other somewhere around month 7. That's all the context you need right now. The rest will come. It was a Wednesday night in October. One of those cold, still nights where everything outside feels like it's already asleep and the only warmth in the world is indoors, right where you are. We were on the couch together, not touching. We'd slowly migrated to our own corners of that couch over the past few months without either of us acknowledging it, but together in the same room, the same space, which felt like enough at the time. I had the TV on. Some documentary about deep-sea creatures, which I'd been half watching for 20 minutes. Leah had her phone in her hand, scrolling. She did this constantly, and I'd long since stopped asking what she was looking at. Not out of indifference, out of exhaustion. Because every time I asked, she'd either flip the screen down casually and say nothing, or she'd show me something completely innocuous, and I'd feel stupid for wondering. So I stopped asking. I watched a bioluminescent jellyfish pulse in slow motion on the screen. I sipped my tea. I existed. And then I heard it. Not a sound, but a shift. That particular silence that happens when someone next to you stops scrolling and starts typing. The tiny rhythmic taps of fingernails on glass. I didn't look over immediately. I told myself I was watching the documentary. But the thing about being in a relationship that's quietly falling apart is that your senses start picking up signals your brain pretends not to notice. You hear everything. You just get very good at acting like you don't. I kept my eyes on the TV for another few seconds. Then, slowly, naturally, like I was just adjusting my position on the cushion, I shifted slightly. Just enough. And I saw her screen. She was on Instagram. That part wasn't surprising. She lived on Instagram, had about 4,000 followers, posted aesthetic pictures of coffee cups and sunsets, and her perfectly arranged bookshelf. What stopped me wasn't the app. It was the post she was looking at. A guy named Tyler. His profile picture, some guy I vaguely knew existed from a comment thread I'd seen months ago, someone she'd mentioned once as just an old friend from college, was at the top of the screen. The post itself was a photo. A beach. Warm light, late afternoon. The kind of picture that looks effortless but probably took 47 tries. He was in it, half turned away from the camera, looking at the water. And in the comment section, right at the top, freshly typed, "Leah, missed this so much. I read it twice." My brain actually made me read it twice, like it needed to verify what my eyes were reporting. "Missed this so much." With the crying face emoji. Typed while sitting 3 feet away from me. While I was right there. While we were supposed to be having a quiet evening together. Here is what I felt in that exact moment. Nothing. Not anger. Not betrayal. Not the hot rush of jealousy I might have expected. Just nothing. Like a circuit breaker tripping. Everything going completely, eerily quiet inside. And in that quiet, a thought arrived. Clear as a headline. She misses something she feels she can't say to you. She misses something she doesn't even know she's showing you. She typed that with you sitting right there. That's not carelessness. That's how invisible you've become to her. I didn't say anything. I didn't make a sound. I didn't shift back to my side of the couch dramatically. I just looked at the screen for one more second. Then I picked up my own phone. Opened Instagram. Found Tyler's post. Found Leah's comment. And I liked it. Her comment. My girlfriend's comment on another man's beach photo. I double-tapped that little heart until it turned red. And then I set my phone face down on the armrest. And I stood up, slowly, without urgency, like I was just going to get a glass of water or use the bathroom. I walked to the hallway, slipped on my shoes, didn't tie them all the way, just enough, picked my jacket off the hook by the door, and walked out. I pulled the door shut behind me, quietly. No slam, no force, just a soft click. The kind of sound a door makes when someone closes it like they mean it, but doesn't need anyone to hear. She didn't notice. I knew she wouldn't. Not immediately. When someone is that absorbed in their phone, in their own world, their own feelings, their own nostalgia typed out in 7 words and a crying emoji, the physical presence next to them becomes furniture. I was furniture that night, and furniture doesn't leave. Until it does. I walked 3 blocks in the cold without knowing where I was going. My shoes were half-tied and my jacket was unzipped, and the air was that sharp October kind that cuts straight through whatever you're wearing. I didn't care. I sat down on a bench outside a closed coffee shop. A little awning above me kept the wind off my face. I sat there and I breathed. In and out. Slowly. Like I was counting something. My phone buzzed once in my jacket pocket. I didn't check it. I looked at the street instead. A cab rolled past, headlights sweeping across the wet pavement. Somewhere nearby, a dog barked twice and then stopped. The world was just continuing. That's the thing about these moments. The ones that feel enormous and shattering inside your chest. The world outside just keeps going. The cab doesn't slow down. The dog doesn't know. The October night doesn't pause to acknowledge that something just ended for you. It just keeps being October. My phone buzzed again, then twice more in quick succession. Then it rang. I looked at the screen. Leah. I stared at her name for a full 5 rings. Then I declined it and put the phone back in my pocket. I wasn't ready to have that conversation. Mostly because I didn't know yet what that conversation was supposed to be. Was I angry? Was I hurt? Was I looking for an explanation that would make it make sense? I sat with those questions on that bench for a long time. And the answer that kept surfacing underneath all the noise was something I hadn't expected. I wasn't angry. I was relieved. That scared me more than the comment had. When relief is the thing you feel when your relationship cracks open, it means you'd already known something was broken. You'd just been the only one still holding the pieces in place. I thought about the last time I'd felt genuinely happy with Leah. Not comfortable. Not fine. Not grateful to have someone. Actually happy. I had to go back 6 or 7 months to find it. A Saturday morning in late spring. We'd woken up before our alarms, which almost never happened, and she'd made coffee before I even got out of bed, and we'd sat on the small balcony of our apartment in our pajamas not saying much, just watching the neighborhood wake up. That was good. That was real. I missed that version of us. But I also knew that version had been fading long before tonight. Tonight just made it impossible to pretend otherwise. I got up from the bench and started walking again. No destination, just movement. I walked past the row of restaurants that would be open for another hour, past the dry cleaner with the flickering sign, past the small park where a couple was walking a dog on a leash that kept tangling around their legs. They were laughing about it. I watched them for a second, that easy laugh between 2 people who are still in the part of things where everything is funny. I kept walking. My phone buzzed again. A text this time. I checked it at the next crosswalk, standing under the orange streetlight. Leah, where are you? Then 30 seconds later. Leah, I saw the notification. I stared at that second message for a long time. For words. She saw the notification. The like. My like on her comment. That's when she noticed I was gone. Not when the couch felt empty. Not when she looked up from her phone. Not when the apartment went quiet. When she got the notification. When her phone told her that her boyfriend had liked her comment on another man's post. That's when she realized something was different. I slid my phone back into my pocket. The light changed. I crossed. I ended up at my friend Ben's place. Ben and I had been friends since college. The kind of friendship where you can show up at 10:30 on a Wednesday without calling first and the door will still open. He opened it in his socks and a faded hoodie, took one look at my face, and stepped aside. Tea or something stronger? Tea, I said. He nodded. No questions yet. He understood the order of things. First you get the tea, then you talk. I sat at his kitchen counter while he put the kettle on. He didn't ask what happened. He just moved around his kitchen in that comfortable, unhurried way that people do when they're giving someone else space to breathe. I appreciated it more than I could have articulated in that moment. After a while, I said, she commented on a guy's photo while sitting next to me. He turned around. What kind of comment? Missed this so much with the crying emoji. Ben was quiet for a second. Then he said, You sure it wasn't something innocent? Like she missed the beach or something? She went to that beach with him, I said. How do you know? Because I saw a photo she was tagged in from 3 years ago at that same beach. Another silence. You knew this guy existed? Vaguely. She mentioned him once. Said he was a college friend. Ben set 2 mugs on the counter. And tonight is the first time this happened? The first thing that felt actually wrong. I started to say yes. Then I stopped. Because the honest answer was no. And I think Ben could tell, because he just waited. Here's the part one hadn't told anyone. For months ago, I'd found a conversation on her phone. Not by snooping. We'd been sharing a cab home from a friend's wedding reception, both a little tired, and her phone had been in my lap because her bag was full and her hands were occupied. A message had come through. I'd glanced at the screen, purely reflexive, the way you do, and seen a name. Tyler. And the preview of the message. I keep thinking about what you said last week. Do you still mean it? I'd put the phone face down on my knee. I hadn't said anything in the cab. We'd gotten home. She'd taken her phone back, and I'd watched her screen light up in her hand, and I'd watched her expression do something complicated and quick before she put it away. I hadn't said anything then, either, because I was afraid of what she might answer. Afraid that asking the question would make the answer more real than I was ready to handle. So I'd folded it up small, put it in the same place I put everything that was too uncomfortable to sit with, and I'd left it there for 4 months. I told Ben this. All of it. The cab, the message preview, the 4 months of pretending I hadn't seen it. And tonight, the comment, the like, the quiet walkout. Ben listened to the whole thing without interrupting. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "You liked her comment?" "Yeah." And then just walked out without saying anything. "Yeah." He exhaled slowly through his nose. "That's a very specific kind of quiet," he said. "I know. What are you going to do now?" That was the question I didn't have an answer to yet. What do you do when you've been swallowing things for 4 months and the swallowing finally stops? What do you do when you're not angry, when the anger has dissolved into something heavier and slower, more like grief than rage? What do you do when you realize that the conversation you should have had months ago has been accumulating interest the whole time, and the bill is now enormous? "I don't know yet," I told him. He nodded like that was the right answer. "You don't have to know tonight," he said. "She's still texting me. You don't have to answer tonight either." I held the mug with both hands. The warmth felt like the only solid thing. She said she saw the notification. I figured. What do you think she's thinking right now? Ben considered this. "Probably that you know," he said. "And probably that she has some explaining to do. And probably a little bit of panic." "Yeah. Does she deserve the panic?" I thought about that for a long time. "She deserves an honest conversation," I said eventually. "Which is probably scarier." I slept on Ben's couch that night. He gave me a blanket and turned the heat up slightly and didn't make me talk any more than I wanted to. I lay there in the dark, listening to the apartment settle around me. Outside, the city did its quiet nighttime thing. A siren somewhere far away, the low hum of something, the occasional car. I thought about Leah. Not the Leah from tonight. The Leah from that Saturday morning in spring. Coffee in her hands, hair still messy from sleep. One knee pulled up to her chest as she watched 2 pigeons argue about something on the railing across the street. She'd laughed at those pigeons. The kind of laugh that's completely unguarded. I'd loved her then. I was sure of that. The question I lay there with, in the dark of Ben's living room, was whether love being real once is enough. Whether something genuine in the past justifies pretending it's still genuine now. Whether loyalty to what something was is the same thing as loyalty to what it actually is. I didn't arrive at any clean answers. But somewhere around 1 in the morning, I arrived at something like clarity. Not resolution. Just clarity. I knew what I needed to do. And I knew that I'd needed to do it for months. And I knew that the only reason I hadn't was because I'd made myself very small, very quiet, very good at folding things up and storing them somewhere out of sight. The same thing she told me I did. Make things smaller than they are. She was right about that. She just had it backwards. I wasn't making things smaller than they were. I was making myself smaller than I was. And I was done with that. I got back to the apartment around 10 the next morning. I'd texted her a single message before I left Ben's place. "I'm coming back around 10. We need to talk." She'd replied immediately, "Okay, I'm here." 3 words. No emoji. No question marks. No defensive exclamation points. Just, "Okay, I'm here." That told me something. I rode the elevator up and unlocked the door, and she was sitting at the kitchen table. Not on the couch with her phone. At the table. Both hands wrapped around a mug. She'd been crying. Her eyes had that particular swollen look that doesn't go away for hours, and her mascara from yesterday was faintly smudged beneath her left eye. She looked up when I came in. She didn't say anything. I hung my jacket up, sat down across from her. We looked at each other for a moment. Then she said, "I'm sorry." Just like that. Immediately. No preamble, no building up to it, no explanation first. Just, "I'm sorry." I nodded slowly. "What are you sorry for?" I asked. Not cruelly. Genuinely. Because I needed to know what she thought she was apologizing for. Was it the comment? Was it Tyler? Was it 4 months of something I'd been too afraid to name? She looked down at her mug. "For being careless," she said. "For making you feel like you weren't there." I let that sit for a moment. "There's more than just last night," I said. She nodded. She already knew. "I know," she said quietly. "For months ago," I said. "In the cab from the Hendersons' wedding." Her face changed. Just slightly. A small tightening around the eyes. "You saw the message." I saw the preview. She closed her eyes for a second. When she opened them again, she looked like someone who'd been carrying something very heavy and had just set it down. Not in relief, but in exhaustion. "I kept waiting for you to say something," she said. "I kept waiting for there to be nothing to say." We sat with that. Two people who had both been waiting for the other person to be the one to start. And neither of us had. For 4 months. "Tell me about Tyler," I said. She took a breath. "We dated for about 2 months in college," she said. "Before I graduated. It wasn't serious, or it wasn't supposed to be. We just had this connection that was hard to explain. When it ended fine. No drama. But," she paused. "But we stayed in contact. On and off. Nothing inappropriate. Just check-ins. How are you? Here's where I am. Here's what I'm doing." And recently? Another pause. Longer this time. A few months ago he reached out and said he was going through something hard. A breakup. He was struggling. And She stopped. "You?" I was there for him in a way that probably crossed a line. She said it carefully. Deliberately. "Not physically. We don't even live near each other. But emotionally." The conversations got more frequent. More personal. And I said some things that I shouldn't have said. "What kind of things?" She looked at me. "That I sometimes missed who I used to be when I was with him. Not him specifically. Just who I was then. Before I got into something serious." I felt that land somewhere in my chest. Before I got into something serious. Before us. "Did you tell him you were unhappy with me?" She shook her head. Not directly. But I think the implication was there. And I let it be there without correcting it. I nodded. Slowly. Absorbing. "That's what the message in the cab was about? What you'd said?" "Yes." "And last night's comment?" She looked down again. "I wasn't thinking," she said. "I didn't even think about the fact that you were right there. I just scrolled past his photo and felt something and typed it. Without thinking about me at all. It wasn't an accusation. It was just the truth of what had happened. And she didn't try to dispute it. Without thinking about you at all," she confirmed. That honesty, as painful as it was more than I'd expected. More than the version of Leah I'd built up in my head over the past year. The one I was always slightly afraid of disappointing, would have offered. This felt like a different person. Or maybe the same person without the performance. "Can I ask you something?" I said. "Yeah." "Why did you tell me I made things smaller than they were?" She blinked. Like she hadn't expected that question to surface here. "That argument in the kitchen?" "Yeah." She was quiet for a moment. "Because I was frustrated," she said. "And I think I needed you to push back more. I kept waiting for you to get angry, to demand more, to make it clear that you weren't okay with things. And you never did. You just absorbed. And it made me feel like none of it mattered. None of what mattered. What I did. What I said. The direction things were going." She paused. "When someone keeps forgiving you without ever making you feel the weight of what you're being forgiven for, it starts to feel like permission." I stared at her. Because she'd just described, in 2 sentences, what I'd been doing wrong. Not too sensitive. Not too much. The opposite. I'd been so determined not to be difficult, not to be dramatic, not to make things bigger than they were. Her words, absorbed and internalized, that I'd made myself disappear. And when you disappear gradually, quietly, the person next to you stops accounting for you. Not because they stop caring. Because you've taught them that you don't take up space. "I saw your comment," I said. "And my first instinct wasn't to confront you." "I know. My first instinct was to like it and leave without you noticing." "I know. Why do you think that is?" She looked at me steadily. "Because somewhere along the way, you decided that your feelings weren't worth a scene," she said. "And I think I helped you decide that." There it was. The realest thing either of us had said since I walked back through the door. We'd built a dynamic, the two of us together, equally, where she got to feel everything loudly and I got to feel nothing quietly. Where her emotions were treated as events and mine were treated as inconveniences. Not out of malice. Out of habit. Out of patterns neither of us had examined until they were too deep to ignore. I'm not going to ask you if you have feelings for him, I said. She looked slightly surprised. Because I think the real question is whether you have feelings left for this. She didn't answer immediately. And the fact that she didn't answer immediately told me a lot. I don't know, she said finally. Two of the hardest, most honest words a person can say. I appreciated them even as they landed heavily. Me neither, I said. We sat in the kitchen with that shared uncertainty between us. Not fighting, not crying. Just two people who'd finally arrived at the truth of where they actually were, instead of the polished version they'd both been maintaining. What did you feel when you walked out last night? She asked. Nothing, at first, I said. Then, when I was outside, relief. She flinched. Not dramatically, just a small movement, like something had touched a bruise. That's the part that bothered me most, I continued. Not what you typed. Not Tyler. The fact that relief was my first real feeling. Because it meant you'd been holding something for a long time. Yeah. She nodded slowly. I felt panic, she said, when I saw the notification. Your name on my comment. I panicked. What kind of panic? The kind where you realize something you've been doing in the dark just happened in the light. She paused. And then I felt something else. What? Shame, she said. Real shame. Not the kind where you're embarrassed about getting caught. The kind where you know what you did was wrong regardless of whether anyone was watching. I believed her. That's the thing about Leah. Her flaws were real, but so was her self-awareness. It had always been one of the things that made me love her. The problem was that self-awareness without action is just a very well-articulated wound. You can describe your damage perfectly and still not do the work to address it. We talked for another 2 hours. Not argued. Talked. In the way we probably should have been talking for 4 months. She told me more about the conversations with Tyler, not to justify them, but because I'd asked and because she seemed to understand that partial honesty wasn't really honesty at all. She told me that around month 7 of our relationship, she'd started feeling like we were operating on autopilot. That the warmth was still there, technically, but it had become routine instead of chosen. She said she should have told me that instead of turning sideways toward someone else. I told her about the things I'd been swallowing. The cab message. The times I'd noticed her phone angled away from me. The gradual recalibration of my own needs downward, like turning a dial so slowly you don't notice the room getting colder. She listened. She didn't interrupt. And when I finished, she said, I didn't know you felt any of that. I didn't tell you. Why not? Because you made it clear that I made things smaller than they were, I said. And I took that to mean my feelings were too big for this space. She closed her eyes. Open them. I hate that I made you feel that way. I know. I didn't mean it the way you heard it. What did you mean it? She thought about this carefully. I meant that you were too quick to concede. Too quick to accept my version of things. I wasn't dismissing your feelings. I was frustrated that you wouldn't fight for them. She exhaled. But I can see how that would have sounded like the same thing. It did sound like the same thing. I'm sorry. I nodded. And I meant it when I said, I believe you. By the time we'd finished talking, the morning had turned into early afternoon. Light was coming through the kitchen window and hitting the table between us, and at some point we'd both refilled our mugs without either of us suggesting it. Just moved to the kettle and back like that was something we still knew how to do together. I looked at her across the table. She looked tired. I probably looked the same. I don't think we're in a good place, I said. No, I don't think last night was just one bad moment. No, she agreed. I think we've been not in a good place for a while, and we've both been too scared to admit it. She looked at the table. Yeah. So what do we do? It was the first time I'd asked that question genuinely, not rhetorically, not as the opening to an already decided conclusion, but actually not knowing what the answer should be. Because I still had feelings for her. They weren't gone. They were complicated and bruised and mixed up with other things, but they weren't gone. And I think some part of me, the part that had been on that bench in the October cold the night before, was hoping that this conversation, the one we'd been postponing for months, might be the beginning of something more honest, something more real than what we'd been doing. She looked up at me. I don't want to lose you, she said. You were pretty casual about that last night, I said. It came out quieter than I intended, but it landed. She didn't deflect it. I know, she said, and I can't undo that. The comment, the conversations with Tyler, the way I made you feel like you were background noise. Her voice was steady, but something in it was fraying at the edges. I can't undo any of it. No, I said. You can't. But I can stop. I looked at her. I can stop having the conversations with Tyler. I can stop scrolling through his life while you're sitting next to me. I can stop treating your silence like permission. She swallowed. If you'll let me try. This is the part where I could tell you I made a clean, certain decision, one way or another, that I looked at her across that kitchen table and either said yes, let's try, or stood up and said I think we're done. But the truth, the actual human truth, is that it wasn't clean. It was messy and uncertain and sitting somewhere in the in-between. What I said was, I'm not willing to go back to what we were. She nodded. I'm not asking you to, she said. Whatever happens next, whether it's together or not, has to be different than this. I know. I'm done being furniture. That one made her breath catch. You were never supposed to be furniture, she said quietly. I handled things badly. So did I said. Staying quiet wasn't noble. It was avoidance. I was afraid of your reaction, so I absorbed things instead of addressing them. We both did things wrong. Yeah, I said. We did. I looked at my hands on the table, then at her. I'm going to need some time, I said. Not necessarily time away, but time to figure out how I actually feel about all of this outside of this kitchen, outside of this conversation. Okay, she said. And I'm going to need you to actually stop contact with Tyler. Already done, she said. I looked at her. This morning, she said. I sent him a message this morning telling him that we needed to stop talking, that I'd been inappropriate, and I was sorry. What did he say? He said he understood. I nodded. I believed her again, which was something. The following 2 weeks were strange. Not cold, not warm, just carefully, self-consciously honest. We'd have dinner, and we'd actually talk. Not about logistics, not about whose turn it was to handle what errand, but about things. Real things. How we were each doing. What we were thinking. She stopped keeping her phone screen angled away from me. I stopped folding my feelings up before they could take up space. There were hard nights. A Thursday where we sat in almost silence for an hour because we'd started a conversation that had gotten too close to something raw and neither of us had known how to navigate it. A Sunday morning where she cried in the shower and I could hear it, and I stood outside the bathroom door for a moment, not knowing whether to knock. I knocked. She opened it. We sat on the bathroom floor together for about 20 minutes, not saying much. That was different than what we'd been. That was two people actually in the same space. About 3 weeks after that night, we had one more real conversation, the one that hadn't happened yet. She came home from work and I was already there and we made dinner together, which we used to do all the time and had stopped without either of us noticing. And after dinner we went to the couch and she sat closer to her side and I sat closer to mine, and then she deliberately closed the gap, moved over, sat near me, like a choice. I looked at her. She looked at me. I want to be here, she said, in this, with you, even if it's harder than it's been. Especially because of that. Why? She thought about it. Because the easy version of us wasn't real, she said. It was comfortable and quiet, and it let both of us avoid things. And comfortable and quiet is not the same as good. I knew that was true. What I want, she continued, is the version where we're actually here. Where you say it when something bothers you. Where I can't just assume your silence means okay. Where I'm not looking somewhere else for what I could be finding here. That's a lot of things to change, I said. Yeah. You think we can actually do that? She didn't answer too quickly. She actually considered it. I think we can try honestly, she said. And I think honest trying is more than what we've been doing. She was right about that. Whatever else was complicated between us, she was right about that. I want to be clear about something. This is not a story with a ribbon on it. We didn't solve everything in one conversation, or 2, or 3 weeks of careful dinners and honest silences. We went to couples therapy, which was uncomfortable and illuminating and necessary. We had sessions where I said things out loud that I hadn't even fully let myself think before, and she did the same, and we sat with each other's truths in a way that was sometimes almost unbearably uncomfortable. We learned, with someone's help, that what we'd built in 14 months was real, but that we'd also developed patterns that were slowly hollowing it out, and that ignoring those patterns was not the same as not having them. I said, out loud, in a room with a third person present, that I'd spent months making myself smaller because I was afraid of being too much. Leah said, out loud, that she'd turned sideways toward an old connection not because she didn't love me, but because I'd made myself so easy to take for granted that she'd started to. It wasn't pretty, but it was true. And truth, even uncomfortable truth, gives you something to actually work with. Tyler never became a recurring figure in this story. He sent her one message about 2 months after she'd cut contact. A brief, final one, and she showed it to me without me asking. Not performatively, not as a gesture designed to prove something. Just openly, naturally. The way you show someone something when you've stopped having 2 separate lives inside one relationship. He said he hoped she was doing well. She replied with something short and kind and final. I watched her send it. I didn't feel the need to say anything about it. That felt like progress. Real progress. Not the absence of difficulty. The presence of trust rebuilt carefully. 6 months after that October night, we're still together. Not in the way we were. In a harder, more deliberate way. In the way where we have to choose it regularly instead of coasting. Some nights are completely ordinary. Dinner, TV, the particular comfortable silence of 2 people who know each other well. And the ordinariness feels earned now instead of just default. Some nights we still have to work at it. Have to stop, restart, look at each other and say, okay, what's actually happening here? I'm not small on that couch anymore. I'm there, fully. And when something sits wrong with me, I say it. Not angrily, not performatively, just clearly, the way I should have been doing from the beginning. Leah is different too, more present, less somewhere else while she's right here. We're not a fixed thing, we're a thing in progress. And the difference between those two is that a fixed thing sits still and quietly deteriorates, and a thing in progress moves forward, sometimes clumsily, sometimes uncertainly, but forward. A few weeks ago, we were on the couch. Same couch. Same position we'd always occupied. Except not anymore, because now there's no gap. She was on her phone. I was reading. She turned her screen toward me and showed me something. A photo someone had posted from a restaurant we'd been wanting to try. "Want to go Saturday?" she asked. "Yeah," I said. "Let's go Saturday." Simple. Ordinary. She went back to scrolling. I went back to reading. But I noticed something. I wasn't listening for the sound of her typing. I wasn't tracking the angle of her screen. I wasn't making myself small so I could quietly tolerate something I didn't understand. I was just reading. She was just there. We were just 2 people on a couch on a quiet evening, and it didn't feel like furniture. It felt like presence. It felt like something chosen. I've thought a lot about that moment. The original one, the one that started all of this. The comment, the like, the quiet exit. People have asked me, when I've told this story to a few close friends, why I didn't just say something. Why I didn't lean over and ask her what that comment meant. Why I chose the quiet walk instead of the direct conversation. And the honest answer is, because I wasn't ready. Not ready for her answer. Not ready for my own feelings. Not ready to have the version of that conversation that would have happened in that moment. Reactive, charged, incomplete. The walk gave me something I needed more than a confrontation. It gave me a moment to know my own mind. To feel what I actually felt, without the pressure of performing feeling in front of her. Without the automatic shrinking. The like on her comment, that small, precise, deliberate act, was the clearest thing I'd done in months. It said, I'm here. I see you. I notice things. And I'm done pretending I don't. If there's anything I'd pass on to anyone sitting on a couch right now, feeling like furniture, it would be this. The silence you're keeping is not protecting anything. It's not being patient or mature or emotionally sophisticated. It's slowly teaching the person next to you that you don't take up space. And people, all of us, even the ones who should know better, will take the space you offer them. Not out of cruelty, out of habit. You deserve to take up space. You deserve to be fully present in your own relationship. You deserve to say the thing out loud instead of liking it quietly and walking out. And if the person you're with doesn't make room for that, doesn't want the version of you that actually shows up and says things and feels things out loud, then that's information. Important information. The kind you need to actually make a choice instead of slowly disappearing. One last thing. The night this all started, sitting on that bench in the October cold, half-laced shoes and an unzipped jacket, and the city moving past without caring about any of it. I wasn't broken. I know it sounds like I should have been. And maybe a version of me, from a few years earlier, would have been. But sitting there, breathing in that cold air, I actually felt something unexpected. I felt like myself. Fully. Quietly. Not shrunk down. Not performing okayness. Just me, on a bench, with the truth of my own situation sitting next to me like an honest companion. And for the first time in months, that felt like enough. That felt like a start. That's the whole story. Listening it twice if something landed. If something in here felt uncomfortably familiar, you already know what to do.